Okay, great. Welcome everyone. Today let's continue on the Confucius Analects, and we are almost to the end. And I will predict we will have three more sections. Today we will start at book 19, chapter 10, and then next week we will finish. I think we will finish book 19. And the week after, we will go to book 20, which only have a three chapter. I'm guarantee we will finish in one setup. So let's start at book 19, chapter 10. Okay, let's continue. And then since everybody regular, and we will have a Kwang. We will have honor, have a Kwang to read his favorite translation. Kwang, please.
Yes, so 19.10 from Professor Eno. Zixia said, the Junzi only labors his people once he has earned their trust. If he has not earned their trust, they will merely see him as demanding. Only after earning trust does he remonstrate with a lord. If he has not yet earned trust, the lord will take it as slander.
Thank you, Kwang. Just 1 minute. Okay, let me share my screen.
Do you want me to read loud?
Oh, yes, please, if you can.
Xia said, only after he has gained the trust of the common people does the gentleman work them hard, for otherwise they would feel themselves ill-used. Only after he has gained the trust of the Lord does the gentleman advise him against unwise action, for otherwise the Lord would feel himself slandered.
Thank you, Mark. So let me share our translation, book 19, chapter 10. Yeah, I hope you can
Book
see the
19,
screen. Yeah.
Chapter 10. Zisha said, a junzi earns trust from the people and then sets them labors. Without their trust, they will think he is harsh to them. He earns trust from his superior and then remonstrates with him. Without his trust, he will take it as a slander.
Thank you, Amam. As I mentioned before, this chapter, this book, book 19, is nothing about Confucius said. Everything is Confucius' disciples said. So we start with Zhang and then continue with Zixia. So today we're still learning what the Zixia, one of Confucius' disciples, said. And then book 10 is continue from last week. I think the message of this one is quite simple because talking about trust to the people, the common people, which is subordinate to you, and trust also important to the people superior to you. So when you talk to your boss, you need to earn his trust first. Otherwise, your advice would be sounds like a slander. You also need to earn the trust from your subordinate, okay, and otherwise your command, okay, or your direct will become harsh in their point of view. So I think that's a very even work for today's working environment, and then the message is pretty simple. And then Amang, you have something to say about this one? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And welcome back, everybody. It's good to see everybody. I hope your autumns have gone well. Let's not call them falls. This is a continuation of Zisha. As Jason just mentioned, all of Book 19 is the testimony of Confucius' disciples and seeing how their lessons have sort of borne fruit in their becoming the teachers or masters. Interestingly, going back to what we had said way back when, Zisha was more highborn, whereas Zhang was sort of his counterpoint, lowborn. And Zisha was much more an underdoer, too cautious, always inclined to not look before he leapt. But in Book 19, we see more testimony of Zisha than any of Confucius' other disciples. We only have two more of these before we get on to a different disciple, and I believe that next one is Ziyu. But apparently there's a meta message here. Zisha, who underdid, who was too cautious, now is the most vociferous teacher of his teacher's lessons. And in each one of his, he's trying to encapsulate as much of Confucius' lessons as possible. So what's he encapsulating here? The importance of being a junzi, the importance of earning trust from people and earning trust from your superiors, the importance of communal work that you need to set people to labor. They need to be participants in their community, in their world. And the importance of remonstration, that oh so important Confucian lesson that is the most hampered or the most sort of cloaked of all of Confucius' lessons. So he really gets at much of what is heart of what one could rightly call quintessential Confucianism. Yeah, that's all I want to say about this chapter. We got just one more of his voice before we move on to another, and then he'll jump in again a little later on.
No, we have I think we have a few more. Okay, and because important thing is 子夏. The next one will be we start to compare. Just pay attention. Just compare with 子夏 and the 子游. Okay. According to I think in book 11, Confucius a comment on 子夏 and the 子游. 子游will show up next. 子游is too much, like what Amang said, 子夏 is underdid. Okay, you do not enough. So you will compare this one, you will see one is running too fast, one is running too small. So that's Confucius' comment on that. So just put this one in your mind, and that would be interesting to compare these two opposite disciples. Okay. So let's have a brief discussion on this one. If you have a question, comment, and then please raise your hand. Nick, please.
Yes, hi, am I audible?
Good.
All right, thanks. I just want to put in a slightly different view than what Armin was articulating. But put it bluntly, I read this as a perversion of Confucius' teaching. Zixia is one of the most successful disciples. I mean, and this saying illustrates how politically astute he was. You know, the fairly sophisticated teachings you would get in the nowadays MBA school education, office politics or whatever. But as we read many passages, Confucius would either say nothing to people he doesn't respect or could not convince, or he would teach the lesson that your own benevolent, your own righteousness, your own Tao, your own morality would come naturally to carry the credibility, instead of working on tactically trying to get the other people's trust in order to carry out your own political or social agenda. I think that was very clear from the description of the Confucius' own behavior, and throughout the Chinese culture. I mean, this idea in this passage was pushed to the extreme by another school of thought, which is the legalism. So I just want to put that thought in there. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick, to share your view on the disciple Zixia and about the legalism. Let's hear from Kwang, please.
Yes, I think next in the comment is very interesting because I am from the Gongyang understanding of Confucius, meaning that the Gongyang understanding of Confucius sees him as a philosopher king. And when the philosopher king died, it is not obvious to have a new one following him immediately after his death. So I think that chapter 19 is very interesting because it is the moment that his closest students or disciples, you choose the word you prefer, would have to think about the political legacy. And let's not forget that the old man, Confucius, had political ambition. Okay. So I think that he would have been happy that his closest students were laying down the main lines of his political legacy, because even if probably, and I say probably because I'm not in their minds, they were probably of a lower caliber in terms of being than Confucius in that sense, they needed to put down some practical guidelines to transmit his political legacy precisely. Because let's not forget that Zhu Xia was at the origin once again of the Gongyang interpretation, in which Confucius was perceived as a philosopher king. And because of Zhu Xia and his disciple Gongyang, Gao and the offspring of Gongyang, Gao, Gongyang, Shao, who lived during the Western Han Dynasty, that those 4 books and 5 classics have been enshrined within the teaching of the Imperial Academy in 124 BCE, 12 years after 136 BCE, meaning the year Confucius has been selected as imperial matrix by Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty. So Zhu Xia and the others, because he's not the only one, was doing the very needed work of stating very clearly the political legacy and the theoretical legacy that would have a long-lasting impact from 136 BCE and 124 BCE, year of the creation of the Imperial Academy. Imperial Academy that would be renewed with each new dynasty till the end of the empire in 1912. And I dare say that the Red Dynasty ruling from Beijing right now is still under the influence of that teaching, even if it can be debatable. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Mark, please.
Sorry. Thanks for opening up all of those historical perspectives. I see that in 418, the master said, in serving your father and mother, you ought to dissuade them from doing wrong in the gentlest way. That's that sort of gentle remonstration. If you see your advice being ignored, you should not become disobedient, but should remain reverent. You should not complain, even if in so doing you wear yourself out. So I know Nick had said that Confucius didn't really go around giving advice. Although I do feel like we've talked about times when even the refusal to give advice is implicitly giving advice. So is his advice here in 418 in relation to parents generalizable to also the relationship to his Lord?
I think that's an open question. Okay, then let me share my answer. In my point of view, Confucius is very, all Confucian school, they are very careful about how to give advice, especially to your superior, your parents, your uh, superior, your parent, your boss. Okay, how to is very important, not just give advice. So that's my observation. Okay, so that's kind of respond to your question, and then in some way we may see this one is a good advice because you should give advice to your boss, your parent, nicely in the right way. But in a way, I think has been practiced overdue. That means a lot of time the boss, the head of state, doesn't want to accept the advice, then accuse the subordinate doesn't do a right way. Okay, that's my observation. Okay, so thank you for ask this question. That's just my own view. So that's really depend. I think Nick probably have his own idea. Nick, please.
Yeah, just respond to Mark's comment, a very good one. So this is my understanding. Confucius is for sure want to advise whoever that's in power or in the position of influence. His overall life outlook is to change the status of the society, of the individual, whatever. But Confucius has a very fundamental principle. You know, the way you give advice should be natural, should conform to the Tao as defined by Confucianism. And that is that's where the Taoism diverge a bit. But they agree on the overall approach that you should behave naturally. So within then the next question is, okay, Confucius, tell me what is your formulation of Tao? And within that Confucianistic construction of Tao, hierarchical order of a society becomes primordial. And he would say, okay, you know, parents, what that come before you, whatever, even if they are wrong. The king, the royalty, the emperor, yeah, come before ministers, come before officials, even if they are wrong. That's it. So he had this rigid construction of social order, and that is, he never proved it, but it was imposed, presupposed, and that's it. So if you follow his school of thought, well, you accept that. Otherwise, you go away. So that is his primary presupposition of the whole teaching. And with that, then you behave, you cultivate yourself, you behave according to the primary principles and whatever. But the citation we are reading just now, Zixia, is actually arguing slightly different. He's saying, well, look, in order to get what you wanted, campaign, lobby, in a way that the counterparty will be convinced. So it sounds very sophistry in that sense. That's why I see this as a bit of perversion of the fundamental teaching of Confucius, which is not perfect, nevertheless, but it has its own logic.
Nick, let me make it clear on your opinion. So you see, Zixia, this teaching is better than what Confucius taught.
Sorry, I didn't catch the keyword. Zhixia's
Well,
teaching is what?
do you like Zhang based on this teaching better than Confucius' teaching?
No, I dislike it personally, but I
Okay.
recognize the realism of his saying.
Okay.
That's why he was most successful in the real life, while the Confucius teaching sounds more elevated, ascended, transcended, enlightening, but it's not really realistic.
Okay, got you. Thank you. Okay, so that's nothing, but again, that's nothing right or wrong, and the purpose is, share what you thought. Okay, and I will say right or wrong, only right or wrong based on the text. Okay, if the text says so, you say another thing, I will say that's wrong. That's the only thing I will say it's wrong. Okay, otherwise there's nothing right or wrong. Kwang, please.
If the teaching of Confucianism and of the school or the scholars is a teaching of the lower trigram, meaning a teaching of information and know-how, and a teaching of the upper trigram, meaning a teaching of awareness, and that awareness would be the master that would use the skills and the information. This paragraph 19.10 is the perfect embodiment of the Confucianist teaching. Because if there is one thing in life that is absolutely central and cardinal in human relations, is that you can ask services or sacrifices from people in direct proportion of the quality of your relation with those people. So if I read again chapter 19.10, the Junzi only labors his people once he has earned their trust. If he has not earned their trust, they will merely see him as demanding. Well, that's a quality of leadership. If you are not respected by your subordinates will perceive what you ask or what you demand as illegitimate. So here it is a quality of leadership as directly coming from the level of your awareness, of your capacity to be in the upper trigram. That is in relation but with people under you. And the other part, the second part of the paragraph, is in the relation to the people above you. Only after earning trust does he remonstrate with a lord. If he has not yet earned trust, the Lord will take it as slander. Once again, if you are an advisor of a sovereign, of any boss, if you don't have a good relation with that boss, maybe you have a good idea. Maybe what you say is very right. But if you don't have the needed relation in order to say what you have to say to that person, it will not necessarily be well taken. So here I see here a simple common sense application of being capable of saying the right thing in the right manner to the right person at the right moment. And that is an absolutely central quality of leadership that I can call judgment or timeliness, but frankly, I prefer judgment. I stop here.
So let me
Thank you,
jump
Kwang.
in here real quick, Jason, because what I'm hearing, I like this discussion and I would let it go on forever. But what I'm hearing here are two different interpretations. One giving the benefit of the doubt that Zisha has the subtext of internalized lessons, raising the character, elevating the person to the capacity where they can earn trust, where they can earn respect. And with Nick, I hear something slightly more cynical, not giving him the benefit of the doubt of the subtext, but hearing a utilitarian sort of use of Confucianist tactics. And I would agree that both of these interpretations could be a valid way of reading it because it is not coincidental that the most successful students of Confucianism were the most cynical. The famous debate of well, I won't get into that, but yeah, it's hard. There's a expression I like to use. You can love your job, you just need to not expect it to love you back. I think that's a great expression in modern times. And I think Nick's interpretation of Zisha has a little bit more of that cynicism, whereas the quintessential Confucianism says, not only should you love your occupation, but you should be of a character where that adoration will be returned to you. And so, yeah, you should love your job and it should love you back. And if it doesn't, you're not doing it right, is kind of a quintessential Confucian value. I'm just splitting the baby here, but I know we want to move on to 1911. So one final word from Quan, or
Quan, you want to say
I will take 20-second promise. I just want to add that Zuxia is at the root of the Kongyang interpretation of universal history. Okay, and once again, the Kongyang interpretation of universal history can be summarized by 3 Chinese characters: Da Yi Tong, meaning the great union of cosmological order and of the human order, or in terms of the hexagram, the union of the upper trigram and the lower trigram. When we are speaking of text, Zuxia proved for me, at least, beyond any doubt, that he was guided by the highest ideal in terms of universal history. So if there is one disciple of Confucius that we can accuse with much difficulty of being cynical, is Zuxia, because he has been the inspiration of the most idealistic, the most long-term vision of Confucianism as inscribed within universal history, the great union of justice and power. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. So let's move on for chapter 11. I just have to say I like this one. So Kwang, you want to read the
yes.
Yeah. Chapter 11.
19.11 by translation by Robert Eno. Zuxia said, if in matters of great import to virtue, one never oversteps the proper bounds. In minor matters of virtue, it is acceptable to be flexible.
Thank you, Kwang. Mark, you want to read the DC Dow's version? Oh.
What verse are we on? 20?
11. 11.
Okay.
Chapter 11.
Book 19, chapter 11. Su Xiao said, if one does not overstep the bounds in major matters, it is of no consequence if one is not meticulous in minor matters.
Thank you, Mark. Chapter 11.
Book 19, chapter 11. Zisha said, do not overstep the boundaries of the major virtues. However, it is permissible to have discrepancy for the minor virtues.
Thank you, Amam. Here, 大德 virtue, okay, and the small virtue, okay. I will let you decide what does 子下 mean, the major virtues or minor virtue, okay. So I will let you decide which one is major, which one is minor. According to 子下 in this thing is the small one, the minor virtue Chinese word called 出入, okay, that means entrance and exit, okay, so I translate as discrepancy, and I also like Dr. Eno's translation, flexible, okay, but I think I have to bring up the original Chinese meaning. You mean you can go in or you can go out, it's okay. So since I'm more flexible people, so personally, I like this one because I think we don't have to be too rigid on the small things. That's my own opinion, and that's the reason I like it. So that's it. Amang, you have something to say?
I find it interesting. Zisha is basically saying, don't sweat the small stuff,
Yeah, I also
but sweat the
surprised.
big, but
I also
sweat the big
surprised that
stuff.
he says
Which honestly, I hear and can appreciate this advice. I also think Taoism actually teaches the inverse of this. Only sweat the small stuff. It's the only thing worth sweating because the big stuff you have no power over. Joy asks, what are the virtues? The word is de, so it's the same word as in Dao De Jing, though it's got possibly slightly different connotation when used in the Analects. And that's the same thing as Dao in the Analects versus Dao in the Tao Te Ching. These are concrete words, but with slightly different spins on them. So when Zisha is talking about Da Dao or Xiao Da, sorry, Da De or Xiao De, large De or small De, he's talking about it is more important to cultivate a overall genuinely good character. And if you forget to set the chopsticks down parallel to the placemat, this is a minor infraction, one could say. It's not bad advice, though I do find it interesting. And I love the sort of dual language, being able to take a term like, sorry, trying to multitask here. Trying to take a term like churro and translate it as discrepancy. It reminds me of some of the other. Oh, you got some voice there. It reminds me of some of the other dualisms in Chinese language, like "zoiyong," you know, left right, almost is how that's translated. So yeah, that linguistically I just appreciate, and I'll hand it over to other opinions.
All right, thank you. So we have Kwang and Paul. Kwang, please.
Yeah, I think that this chapter is very interesting because it is the perfect, let's say, sequel to the 19.10, in the sense that in 19.10, he has stated a general doctrine of judgment, if you want. And in point 11, he adds immediately the nuance. When it's about the major virtue, okay, meaning justice, valor, humanity, wisdom, okay? Because what are the major virtue? What are the cardinal virtues? There are not many of them, okay? They are justice, humanity, valor, wisdom. All the others are minor virtues. So when it's about justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom, you cannot negotiate. You are a gentleman or you are not a gentleman on these major virtues. But when it's about small details, and I will give you a historical example. In many dynasties, you have the victorious candidates to the imperial exam, which will go to a tea house for celebrating their success as the imperial exam at the capital city, okay, the final step. And if you follow the small virtues, It is according to the imperial law of most Chinese dynasties that the scholars should not go to tea houses. Okay, tea houses here have to be understood at a place where you can have fun with women. Okay, it's not only for taking tea. It's a nice way to say it. Well, you have some emperors who have been forced to relinquish a high quality candidate because he was just having fun to celebrate his success as the imperial exam, because some faction of the aristocracy wanted to get rid of that brilliant young man and use that excuse to kick him out of the officialdom. Some emperors had the common sense to say that is a small detail. The young man had the right to celebrate his success as the imperial exam of having a fun night with his buddies, and I will not relinquish a valuable minister and a valuable pillar of the state just because of that ridiculous small role. That is a small virtue that you can get rid of because it doesn't have to do with justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom. And lowly scholars always use that kind of laughable details to get rid of their opponents precisely. I stop here.
Thank you, Con. Paul, please.
Yeah, thanks, Quan and all. The emphasis that we've talked about before about ritual, to some degree, I'll just put it up sort of in devil's advocate mode, flies in the face of this because ritual seems like the need to have the ritual seems like it could easily be interpreted as sweating the small stuff in some degree. And I just wonder if Confucius were asked, this is his disciple talking about it, but if he were asked, for instance, if you could leave some things out of ritual now and then, because they're just, they're minor. Oh, you don't have the blah, blah for the ceremony. No big deal, I'm just trying to contrast that and hearing your comments.
No, I think you're absolutely onto something, Paul. There is sort of a cognitive dissonance here. Recent example, apparently, and I didn't know this until recently, there's a tradition of college football teams taking down one of the goalposts in river cities, having a big celebration in the streets, and throwing the goalpost into the river. I watched a reporter talking about this who was a black man who just watched it with like gobsmacked shock, and he's like, so you just have vandalism and theft and public nuisance and throw it into the Potomac and everyone's okay with this? Because if anything like this happened on the other side of the tracks, there would be riot police. That's kind of the cognitive dissonance that's at work here in the what is acceptable and what is not. What Quan said before about dismissing somebody over what was considered minor infraction, yeah, that's absolutely bad pool. But at the same time, those laws or those enforcements then could legitimately be used to dismiss somebody who had gotten too big for their britches, was doing this too often, didn't have the right sort of cause to go and celebrate. It does wind up being gray. And Zisha seems comfortable with the gray area much more than his master necessarily did. Or at least he's learned to navigate that gray area more than his master did in order to gain himself some degree of success.
Thank you, Imam. Well, my own, as I mentioned before, I really surprised the person like Zixia will say that. Okay, so he's a person being a little bit too small step. I thought you would do reverse. You should be careful on even the small virtue. But surprised me. He says so. So that's my observation. So here, Mark and well, not Mark, Nick and Kwang. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is another evidence for me that Zixia is socially and politically astute. He's not uptight. So imagine in the university, he and Confucius, both teach a course. I mean, he would be very popular with students. Be Confucius, if somebody dozes off in the class, Confucius will say, "Oh, look, it's a piece of dead wood. You're no good." But I can imagine Zixia would say, the guy, "Oh yeah, no problem. Take a nap because I know you worked hard last night. So yeah, this small stuff. As long as we right with the big virtues. That's I can see the consistency of his teaching, Zixia's teaching, and his actual success in the society. But I mean, that's not the point. I think. I mean, these being flexible in daily life, we all know that we are adults. But I think that the crucial point is on the moral teaching. And I want to follow up a key point made by Aman 10 minutes ago. I want to further develop that by adding another aspect. I mean, in addition to the metaphysical difficulty of grasping the big Tao, therefore, we have to pay attention to little doubts because we are not, otherwise we become, in a situation we just talk empty big talks while grease our hand under the table. So we have to pay attention to small stuff because of that metaphysical difficulty. But I want to add another point, which is crucial because in the Confucius tradition, there is a heavy emphasis on being careful, being right, being moral in tiny little stuff. Don't commit wrong, no matter how small they are, and don't forget to make good deeds, no matter how small they are. And that's very critical teaching. And they have pushed this to the extreme in mental exercise. Imagine a situation you are alone. No consequence. You are isolated from society. You're sitting in your apartment, nobody around. There, how do you behave? And this echoes very much the Platonic notion of, the ring of Gaiji. In Republic, if you could get a ring and you wear it and nobody could see you, you can commit anything you want without any consequence. Would you do it? So that's very important thinking within the Confucius school. And conclusion, of course, is that no, you should not commit wrongs even if you are alone. You should do all the virtues, and even if you're alone. And therefore, it carries over, of course, when you open your door, go out of your apartment, how you behave in society. And I think it's there. Zixia's, a little passage here flies in the face of that, the more traditional mainstream Confucius teaching.
Thank you, Nick. Kwang, please.
I would like to bring in an idea that might be a little bit strange at first, but I think that it would be capable to explain it. Let's not forget that Zixia is from the high aristocracy. A member of the high aristocracy in general is much more politically flexible than a member of the low gentry. Why? Because members of the high aristocracy are used from their childhood with the conflictual situations that they are almost imbibe with, and they learn to be diplomatic almost spontaneously. I think here, it's not the main reason, but I think here we have a reflection of the fact that Confucius was of the small gentry and Zuxia was of the high aristocracy. And once again, people born in the high aristocracy in general are much more relaxed in terms of social interactions because they have learned it from their childhood. I also want to add that Zuxia said very clearly in point 11 that in matters of great import to virtue, one never overstep the proper bounds. So he's not being giving, he was not giving the primrose path to those who would take the teaching in an easy manner. Okay, it is clear cut that in matters of great import to virtue, one never overstep the proper bound. So that's an invitation to justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom, but with the open mindedness of the high aristocracy for small details. I stop here.
All right, thank you, Kwang. Mark, please. The other Mark.
Mark,
Are
you're
you
muted.
talking to me?
Yeah, you raise your
Yeah,
hand.
okay. Yeah.
So I call you
Yeah,
the
thanks.
other Mark. You come later.
Yeah, right.
So.
I'm not sure which Mark is this Mark and which is the other. So I'll be the other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you are later. You are
I
late. So.
yeah, I don't I didn't actually know that Confucius came from lower aristocracy, so that was a really interesting comment, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And I want to generally agree with Kwan's sentiment, but I want to express the argument in a slightly different way. People with lower social status are subject to the censor and the punishment of a lot more people in society than people with higher social status. So, like, if you're like a feudal lord or something, and you lie or cheat some poor, peasant or something, it's not that likely that there's going to be consequences for you. But if you're a poor peasant and you lie or cheat to your neighbor or a merchant or somebody who's got a status a little higher than you, then it's likely that there are going to be consequences. And of course, the ultimate example is, what are the consequences for the emperor if he behaves poorly? Well, really, unless he's totally out of hand, there's probably none. If he's behaves really poorly for a long time, then maybe there'll be like a rebellion, or maybe if he neglects like the aristocracy, maybe they'll conspire against him. But the point that I'm trying to get at is the lower your social status is, the more other people's authority you're subject to, and the more you benefit from adhering to the social norms, to the laws, etc. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I have no more thing. And one thing I'd like to mention here, because I think Mark, the Mark Sandberg. Okay, we are in the Eric reading on the Kant, metaphysical morals. And when I read this one, what I'm thinking is the major virtue and the minor virtue. To me, I talk about Kantian interpretation, would be the perfect duty and the imperfect duty. So perfect duty, like you should not kill people, you should not commit suicide, you should not lie. That's the major virtue. You should not violate. And the imperfect virtue is contribute to the society, help the poor. That's imperfect. So you can do whatever you can do. You cannot help everybody in this world. You can do whatever you can do. You contribute to the world. You do whatever you can do. You don't put all out. So that's another way I look at, I will call it the Kantian interpretation of this one, just for reference. Okay. Let's move on to 12, chapter 12. I think that's an interesting one. So, Huang, you want to read, please?
Absolutely. So 19.12 from Professor Robert Eno. Zhu Yao said the disciples at Zixia Gate are well schooled when it comes to matters of sprinkling and sweeping, responding to orders and replying to questions, presenting themselves and withdrawing. These are details. When it comes to the basics in which they are rooted, they are at a loss. Zixia heard of this and said, "Oh, how mistaken Yan You is. When it comes to the Tao of the Junzi, what is taught first determines who will vary last. This may be compared to trees and grasses. Variances in the first shoots mark how they will be different. How can he slander the Tao of the Junzi in this way? It is, after all, only the sage who master it from the beginning to the end."
Thank you, Kwang. Is Mark want to read the DC Dao, or anyone want to read other version? This one is longer.
I'm sorry, I can't.
That's fine. Let me read. This one is longer. Okay, Amang, please.
Book 19, Chapter 12. Zhu Yu said, "The disciples of Zixia are capable of tasks such as sprinkling water and sweeping, responding to calls and replying to questions, presenting themselves and withdrawing. These are acceptable but minute details. Regarding the fundamentals, they seem lacking. How can that be so? How can that be?" Zixia heard this and said, "Oh, how mistaken Yan Yu Ziyou is. To teach the Tao of Junzi is to know who what should be taught first and who what will become wearisome later. It is like plants, which are categorized by their varieties. How can he misinterpret the Tao of Junzi in this way? Only sages keep it from the beginning to the end."
Thank you. Thank you, Amang. So this one is the we'll say the different way of teaching, a pedagogical method, okay, for a pedagogical method for different disciples, Yu and Zixia. So in my personal opinion, I can see this one show Zixia's do it from the small point, right? So here, Ziyu criticized Zixia is starting from the sprinkling water, sweeping, responding to call, replying question, presenting themselves, withdrawing. In Chinese word, 洒扫应对进退 six things, six different things, basics. That's the basic foundation to behave, right? I think today, I'm not sure everybody understand the sprinkling and the sweeping, because in old time, when I was kids, okay, in the school, when we need to sprinkle in the water because it's so dusty. If you don't spring the water, the dust will fly all over the place. So you have to spring first, then sweep. Okay. Then when teacher, your superior call you, you have to answer yes. Okay. And the ask question, you have to respond. You have to know how you present yourself. Basically talking about stand up, how to say bye-bye. Okay. After the thing. So that's the very, very fundamental thing. It's become a fundamental teaching of Confucianism. Okay, so here you have a kind of criticize on that, and we remember on the I remind everyone on the book 11, chapter 16, they kind of criticize each other because Ziyu and the Zixia are opposite. Zixia is under, and the Ziyu is over. So that's the thing why Ziyu criticized Zixia. And then Zixia is doing to defend himself. He said, okay, people are different, and which one first, which one later, that's important. Just like people are different. I put the who and the what because in Chinese word, we don't know. He's talking about Su, okay. I don't know. He meant the person or the subject. So I just have to make the ambiguity here. It could be the person, could be the subject, just like plants. They have a different category. And since they have a different category, you should have a different way of teaching. You cannot treat everyone the same or every subject the same. Just only the sage, okay, can be consistent from the beginning to the end. So this one shows how Zixia think about education. You have to go step by step, okay, small thing, big thing, and then I think that's consistent with his personality. So that's I have to say, and Aman, please.
I'll just point out that this is kind of another handoff chapter. We got this with Zhang and Zixia. Now we're getting a handoff between Zixia and Zuyo. But you notice, you can see right there, Zixia gets the final word here in 1913. I do wonder if that was it was an intentional edit, because it seems that for the sake of continuity, we'd want all of Zixia in a section. We'd want all of Zhejiang in a section. We want all of Zuyo in a section. But here we get this handoff chapter of the two interacting, and then one more final word from Zixia. And so it does seem like the editors of the Analects, the people who wanted to, have the final word, approve of Zixia's message, so much so that they want to give him one more final word. Zuyo doesn't get a lot of airtime in book 19, but he does seem to be sort of at least a cheerleader for a more Zhejiang interpretation of Confucianism. Jason had to step away, so I'm going to grab host duties, and I'll pass it off to Quan first.
Well, I think that what you just say, Amand, is extremely interesting because I would like to point out common sense stuff. Okay, in the book 19, you have 25 paragraphs. On the 25 paragraphs, there are 10 or 11 devoted to Zixia, right? So it's about half of book 19. Let's not forget that this book has been accepted in 136 BCE as imperial matrix. Well, not only that, this book, but is one of the book of a set of books that will become imperial matrix. And 12 years later, in 124 BCE, they will be the foundation of the imperial academy. Meaning that we cannot be sure because that's the only copy that we have. But I am absolutely sure that there was an edition of it in 124 BCE when the Imperial Academy has been created. And if Zixia had 11 paragraphs on 25, it means that his standpoint has been considered as orthodox. And let's not forget that the philosophical interpretation called Gongyang, because his disciple was called Gongyang, has been accepted as the far-reaching universal history framework within that imperial matrix. So it is not a surprise that he had the last word in section 12. I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. And yeah, I agree. It's not a big surprise that he got the last word. Sorry. I just saw something come in on the chat. Yeah, it's not surprising that his comes in as the last word. What is a little more surprising is that sort of the argument is put on display for the other students. So, are the further students of Confucius, if Zhang or Zisha is the final word, then why give Zhejiang or Ziyou airtime? Is it to delegitimate their interpretations of Confucianism, or is it to invite a broader understanding of it? Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just have a question on the interpretation. So are the two guys debating on number one, pedagogical tactics, or are they debating on number two, fundamental attitudes, approach towards the hierarchy of the society? If it's the latter, then that's very significant, because then Zixia would appear to be elitist. And he would say, you know, only certain classes of the society could be, you know, educated of the big stuff, of big Dao virtue. But if they were debating on the pedagogical tactics, then they are consistent with Confucius' teaching, because Confucius himself separates different kinds of audience and then apply different teaching tactics. You know, he might say a few words to the smarter guys, and he might say nothing to the guys he regarded as not too smart. And he may spend a lot of time talking to people he wanted to debate with, like some of the Taoist people. So, but that overall was pedagogical tactics, because Confucius himself thinks everybody could be educated, everybody, no matter how low you are. You know, as long as you show the respect by paying me a little tuition, I'll teach you whatever. So there, Confucius himself is not very elitist, is egalitarian, but Zixia here appears to be elitist. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Nick. Oh, go ahead.
Kwang, you have something to say, or you already?
Yes. I was not sure when Aman said go ahead, was it to me or to you? So I was not sure.
Okay. Go ahead if you have. Go ahead, Aman.
Okay. I would say the question is why the editors of the Analects, who obviously favor Zuxia, still allow the voices of the others to appear in the Analects. I think that the two answers that have been proposed by Amon are both good, in the sense that it is obvious that at least in this 19.12 paragraph, Zuxia appear as the victor of the discussion. However, it doesn't mean that the school wanted to silence completely the other voices to allow a certain margin of discussion. And I think it is healthy that even if within a matrix, it is shown clearly what is the official line, I think it is healthy and perfectly okay to let some dissenting voices to be expressed. And I think it's a good thing. Zuxia being elitist, but of course that he was elitist. He was from the highest aristocracy. The fact that his teacher Confucius managed to make him a little bit more generous, meaning that he has to open his heart to accept people from humble background but with talents and advanced epistemological development, was already something extraordinary that Confucius achieved with that very high ranking aristocrat 25 centuries ago. Let's not forget that the Chinese society between 2500s and the very end of the Han Dynasty in 220 AD, meaning during a period of 700 years, was a very aristocratic society. So Confucius was offering an ideal that took centuries and centuries and centuries, and even still today, it is still ongoing, that education has to be offered to everyone, even to the dumbest. But you have to see the perspective of Xia, a born aristocrat, wanting to recruit the most brilliant minds for the government. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want the peasant to be educated, but it was not his priority. His priority was to recruit the most brilliant minds for the government of the empire. Those brilliant minds can come from the peasantry, of course, but those peasants have to demonstrate that they are outstanding to compensate for their lowly birth. So, absolutely, he was elitist. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwam. Basically, I really appreciate. Thank you for this. Talking about the editor. I really appreciate this book because we can hear a lot of dissenting voice, which I think most of people who learn Confucius kind of miss this part. We should know it's not all agree. Okay, even among his disciples, not all agree in one teaching. I think they have the many teachings. So it's important, at least in my point of view, to review book 19 and see different and it's a healthy criticize, just like our Zoom discussion. We have a different opinion, and then that's the way we can learn from each other. We can improve. So that's the reason I think 19 is important. Let's move to next chapter. But before that, I'd like to, I think, is that Paul? Somebody mentioned about talking about the book of old, Shi Jing. And eventually I talked to somebody and I decide on this Saturday, I'm going to, in my Asian philosophy group, I decide to kind of take a break, talk about Shi Jing, and it's a difficult subject, but I put in the chat here. So 2 o'clock in Pacific time or 5 o'clock in Eastern time this coming Saturday. That's my first try to introduce Shi Jing, okay, the book of old, and being quoted many times in Confucius. I think that's interesting to read or get understand for most of people. The book of old. If you are interested, welcome to join. And then I kind of feel just like, at least in the philosophical point of view, I think the reading or understand Shi Jing or Book of Old, it's just like in Greek philosophy, you should read Homer's, because Socrates, Plato, they always quote, okay, from Homer's, and then that's their source of knowledge. So same thing as Confucius constantly quote Shi Jing, the Book of Old. So it's I would not say crucial, but I would say that would be helpful to get some understanding on this ancient book. And that's what totally up to you, how much you want to learn. So that's why I want to give a brief introduction on this one for this Saturday. It's a try, okay? So mostly it's for myself, and then you are always welcome to join, and then see what's going on and give me some advice. Okay, thank you. So let's continue on chapter 13. I think 13 is very famous one, and most Chinese know this one, and probably we have a different interpretation. Kwang, please.
19.13, translation by Robert Eno. Zhu Xia said, a man in service who is superior should study. A man who is superior in study should serve.
Thank you, Kwok. Anyone have a different version to read? If no, I will have Aman read our translation, and my translation could be different than most. Okay.
Zisha, book 19, chapter 13. Zisha said, a man in service should learn when he has spare energy. A man in learning should serve when he has spare energy.
Thank you, Aman. Most of people, even the translation, most of people read the Chinese will take Dr. Eno's translation. Zixia said, a man in service who is a superior, okay, should study. The man who is a superior in study should serve. Okay, that's most of translation and most of Chinese understand in today. They understand. So that means if you are a professor in college, then you should go to government, okay, to serve. If you're doing well in government, you should go to university to teach. So that's the serve, and then which is nothing wrong with that, and it's pretty good way of talking about. So, but I just have to be loyal to the original text, because the interpretation difference is this word you, okay, you, okay. This word in today's meaning means excellent, excellency, superior. So that means when you in service, 是, right? And if you are doing well in your job, you should 学, you should learn, okay? If you learn well, you should serve, okay? But based on my understanding, and I check with Zhu Xi's interpretation, you, this word during that time doesn't mean superior or excellence. It means relax. It means you have spare time. So if you take this meaning, that means when you serve in government, you should use your spare time to learn, to study. When you are in school, you should take your spare time to serve. Okay, so that's the my translation based on the text, ancient text. Okay, so that's a little, and you don't have to read in this way. I just have to mention my job is be honest to translate the original text. Thank you. Aman, please.
And my job is the murder of commas. This passage is a challenge once translated into English, because without proper commas, the meaning is completely altered. Just read it as a man in service should learn when he has spare energy. Okay, so you need to learn when you've got spare time. Or a man in learning should serve when he's got spare energy. That one's a little easier, but that first half, should you be learning when you have spare time, or should you be learning when you have spare time? These mean very different things. And this is part of the incredible difficulty taking a source language and translating it into a target language. But I agree with Jason. What the message here is that when you are in service, whenever you've got spare time, learn. When you are learning, whenever you've got spare time, serve. That seems very commensurate with fundamental Confucius teachings, that you should love learning enough that you make it your occupation, and you should love people enough, serving others enough, that you should make that your hobby, and or vice versa once one becomes the other.
Yep, thank you, Amam. So here I make another translation. After you have accomplished your job, then study. After you have accomplished your study, then get a job. Okay, that's another advice. I think Amam will be happy to give his student this advice. So, but anyway, nothing wrong on that. And on every translation, I just make my decision based on my understanding of ancient texts. So that's it. Thank you. Paul, please.
Yeah, sometimes when you differ from other readings, Jason, it's important, but it doesn't vastly change it. Whereas this, I really feel it vastly changes it. And I congratulate you. I mean, if this was used for centuries to guide people in their thinking, like they've got it wrong all these centuries, because this is a really important difference. So I just want to thank you for pointing out why you think it, and it makes much more sense to me, because the other one is very extreme. You're already really good at something, abandon it entirely and do this other thing. You're already good at this other thing, abandon it entirely. That doesn't even make sense to me. So this makes much more sense, and I thank you for teasing it.
Thank you. Sometimes I have to translate it. Even it doesn't make sense, I have to translate it in a certain way. But anyway, I just have to stick to some principle, and then do it. And sometimes it's very difficult to deal with a text more than 2,000 years old. Because, for example, I'd like to make the example. If you read the book 1, chapter 1, all people interpret in the wrong way, in my opinion. But it's too late, 2,000 years later to change. Or talking about 宰我, okay, sleeping in the daytime. I think they are wrong for 2,000 years and too difficult to correct. So if people have been wrong for 2,000 years, how can I correct it? That's a big question. But anyway, that's the fun part of working on this job, because nobody pay me. So I just do whatever I want to do. So anyway, thank you, everyone. We have Kwang and Nick, please.
Well, I would like to say that what Jason proposed is not in contradiction with the usual translation, in the sense that if I read again Professor Ino's translation, who is, as Jason said, quite right, the usual understanding, a man in service who is superior should study, and a man who is superior in study should serve. In my mind, it is not mutually exclusive, okay? In the sense that if you see someone that is good in his job, well, he can study to improve his capacity to perform in his job. For example, if someone enlists as a sailor in the Navy and his superior see that he's a good sailor, they would recommend him to be a cadet at Annapolis, to be a commissioned officer, for example. Okay, so it's not mutually exclusive. And once he would finish his study at Annapolis, he would be capable to keep on his career in the Navy, but at a higher standing. Okay, and a man who is superior in study should serve, meaning that if you see someone which is outstanding in economics, for example, well, it doesn't prevent him to keep on his academic career, but he can be proposed as a economic advisor to the president, for example, and one doesn't prevent the other, in my opinion. So, my opinion is that maybe you put things clear cut and crystal clear, but the usual translation is not an invitation to relinquish what you are already good in, but to add something else so it becomes a virtuous circle. Okay, let's not forget my favorite object is the hexagram, and the hexagram is precisely learning and practice what you learn. And I want to repeat again paragraph 19.6 that we read last time. Zhuxia said to study broadly and deepen one's resolve, to question closely and reflect on things near at hand, run lies therein. Okay, so once again, it's about learning for serving. And if you serve and you're so really good in serving, maybe you should deepen your learning in order to better serve. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. Actually, of course, there's no conflicts between two interpretation and which is match very well. And that's how the Chinese word "you" has been changed from ancient time, being developed from legal, okay, spell to superior. Okay, so same word being evolved to a new meaning on that. So I probably do it too much to stick with ancient, to show off. Okay, I'm doing that. I probably have this kind of thing tendency to do. But again, you can take any meaning you want. Okay, anyway, Nick, please.
Jason,
Yeah.
sorry, Nick, I don't mean to jump over the gun here, but I wanted to point out something. Once a stop clock is right twice a day. Leggy agrees with your translation, by the way. When Leggy did his translation, the first English translation, this is how he translated you
Okay.
as leisure or spare time.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I agree first with the consensus that you know, the commonsensical understanding of learning and serving. So this is slightly different from the Greek notion that you only serve because otherwise the worst people would rule you. But I want to focus on a tiny linguistic point about this keyword "you." And it seems to me your second translation, your alternative translation, actually is closer to the original meaning of "you" compared to your first translation. And I'll explain why. And this could be a little bit explaining. "You," this keyword, right? Think about the Greek notion of ergon, right? So, you know, everything has its function. And when you perform the function to the extreme, that's called excellence, virtue. So virtue is the perfection of the function. And here, if you use that notion and think, you know, official has a function to perform. And when he or she actually perfected that performance of the function, yeah, okay, then he should learn something more. Yeah. So this is a bit extra added to the Greek notion of you know, perfection in performance of the function. You know, once you reach the perfection, what do you do next? I think here Confucius' answer would be, okay, you learn a bit more. Right? Don't just be satisfied with how good you are at your current function. Similar thinking applies to learning. Right? Your student, your pupil, you learn to the best. And then what? Well, go out serve. So I think that if that's understanding, then your second translating actually carries that connotation. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Yeah. So any other comment on that? Or anything you want to discuss on this chapter? If no, we can move on to chapter 14. Very short. Okay. Kwang, please.
19.14, Zhu Yao said, in mourning, exhaust grief, and then stop.
Go to grief. Thank you, Kwang. So right now we finished what Zixia is talking about. So right now we move to Ziyu. Okay.
The Book 19, chapter 14. Zhu Yu said, at a funeral, one should fully express his grief and then stop. Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I probably don't have much comment on this one. It's just talk about 丧自乎 at funeral one should fully express grief and stop. Okay, so I will open to discussion. I probably don't have much, don't give too much thought on this one. So
I will just point out one thing about this. Zhu Yu is talking about funeral propriety, which, if we think back to Confucius' resume, that was where he began, was in preparing funeral rites for people and doing funerary ceremonies. And so right here, Ziyu cuts right to the heart of what is I would say quintessential Confucianism. There's an event, there's a way you should do it, but the authentic way to engage with it is to express your grief, but then stop. Don't make a show of it. Don't, milk it. Don't try and exaggerate it for more than what it's worth. You do the thing in its place, in its time, and then you move on from it. Granted, this does not sound like Confucius' prescription for 3 years of grieving, but he's not saying that that isn't valid. He's just saying the full expression of your grief, it occurs at this occasion. And that is the appropriate venue for it. And that's what it needs to be facilitated for. That's what he took away from the master's lessons.
Okay, thank you, Aman. Sounds like you will take the keyword is stop. You should fully express, then stop. And some people may take the keyword as fully. Okay, so I think that really depends on how you want to read it, because it's old text, and then really depend on how you want to practice based on this. So I'd like to hear from everyone. How do you think about this text, and what are your thoughts on that? No,
Maybe
too
I
simple.
have a short. I have a short comment.
Go ahead.
I think that in modern psychology, we all know the step of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in the sense that you start by the denial, and after that you have the anxiety, the depression, and after that you reach to acceptation, right? Here, I think that in a very short paragraph shows a lot of psychological insight, in the sense that when you have a loss in mourning, well, you would have to go through all those stages. Okay, you have to exhaust that grief and then stop. Okay, life is coming back to normal. You keep on with your life.
Okay, thank you. So any other comment? Too short to comment, look like. So let's move on to chapter 15, and another short chapter. We'll have Kwang to read for the.
Okay, so Professor Eno's translation of 19.15, Zhu Yao said, my friend Zhang does things hard to do, but this is not yet a run.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, another criticize from so let's read 15. Okay.
Book 19, chapter 15. Zhu Yu said, my friend Zhang likes to do the hard work, but this alone cannot be Ren.
Okay, so here is an use complain, criticize. Zhang is Zhang. Okay, my friend Zhang like to do hard work, okay, but not rich 人. Okay, so here, let me see. 子张, according to Confucius' comment, is too progressive. Okay, so Confucius compare 子张 with 子夏, right? 子夏 is under, 子张 is too much. So I think that's the reason. 子游 have a comment on 子张 is doing too much. I think he talk about doing hard work. 为难能也. He doing something people cannot do. Okay, but this one cannot reach 人. So I think next one also the same thing. Okay, but anyway, we talk about this one, next one later. But Amang, you have some comment on this one?
Yeah, I just find it interesting that Ziyu is the voice of contradiction to both Zisha and Zhejiang. He gets just these very few, words in edgewise in all of Book 19. If anyone has probably one of the briefest or tersest contributions to Book 19, it's Ziyu. But in two of those contributions, he's contradicting or at least challenging two of his contemporaries' interpretation. And he himself has this incredibly pithy, little quip about funerary rites, back where it all started, back where Confucius began to understand what it was to be Ren, what it was to observe Li, what it was to actually be genuine and trustworthy and heartfelt and honest. And I find Ziyu really kind of not just an amuse-bouche, but kind of a hint. Here is a guy may not have had success with Confucianism, but boy, did he get it. He got it enough that he was able to talk to the people who were successful with it and say, you're close, but these are the points you're missing. I really like that about Ziyu. There's not a lot of him in the Analects, but this is, where we get to hear his voice as kind of the, I don't know, the voice of Confucius past, sort of echoing into his students in the present, saying, you're missing the mark, guys. I like that about him.
All right, thank you, Amang. Any other comment?
Yes, I would like to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here, and it's a little bit in the same direction that Aman's comment, in the sense that I always said that you have to distinguish three Confucianism. First, the school for the aristocratic education, the epistemological growth, the imperial matrix, and what I would call the control milieu or environment of the scholars. So here, if we give the benefit of the doubt to Ziyu, he might be upholding the dimension of the epistemological growth compared to the imperial matrix and the control environment of the scholars. Once that Confucianism as a school for aristocratic education has been chosen, selected as the imperial matrix, it was a good thing and it was a bad thing. It was a good thing because the state from 136 BCE will protect Confucianism, but it was a bad thing because as a tool of the state, you are, let's say, you have to perform. And sometimes to perform means that you will maybe neglect the essential, what is the development of the cardinal virtues. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Yeah, let's continue for one more section. Then we will stop, and then we will and then you will see how the way Zhang, another great Confucius disciple, criticized Zhang. Okay, Kwang, please read.
19.16, translation by Professor Robert Eno. Master Zhang said, Zhang is very imposing, but it is hard to pursue a run side by side with him.
Okay, Amang, you want to read?
Sure. 1916. Zhang Zi said, "What a high appearance Zhang has. It's difficult to practice Ren being together with him."
Thank you, Amang. So basics, this one put together. I just have to doubt the editor really has a problem with Zhang because he put the Ziyu and Zheng Zi, these two disciples, to criticize Zhang together on the same subject about Ren. So that's it. And then any comment from Amang and the others?
Yeah, I'll just say it is kind of a pile on, isn't it, about Zhang not being Ren. You almost get the impression that Zhang was walking around strutting almost, saying, "Look how Ren I got to be. You know, I got good and solid Ren character because I studied under Confucius," and all the rest of his classmates just kind of went, he just doesn't get it, does he? He's just not ever gonna get it. I kind of like that I'm the greatest guy here attitude that he has, that probably didn't make him, popular with his classmates, though maybe notorious would be a better phrase. So obviously likable enough because yeah, he's a fun guy. He's just not the top of the class that he thinks he is.
Thank you, Amang. Kwang, please.
Here, it's interesting that the translation that I read and Amon's translation differs slightly. In Amon's translation, Zhang has good appearance or something like that. But it's difficult to pursue run side by side with him. Is it because he put on the stress on the appearance of having studied with Confucius? Or in the translation with by Professor Eno, Zhang is very imposing, but it is hard to pursue run side by side with him. Here, imposing can be understood not only as a question of appearance, but also the way he spoke, the articulation of his speeches, the way he's capable to convince in court at political debates and things like that. That could, let's say, cover or include what I call the skills in the political landscape, and not necessarily, let's say, motivated by the higher virtues of justice, humanity, wisdom, and valor. Anyway, once again, it is always the same problem: Confucianism as a school of epistemological growth, or Confucianism as the imperial matrix. I suppose that the ideal is to combine both those fields, okay? Lower trigram and upper trigram. There are many anecdotes in Chinese history where you have people insisting a little bit too much on the higher virtues and not being realistic or practical enough. And on the reverse, you have people who were very Machiavellian, very skillful, but maybe lacking in justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom. And you have also people having combined the two. Okay, I don't want people to forget that there were Confucianist scholars having occupied high position in government who managed to navigate and combine the two. So I would say that it is inevitable, as in all school of epistemological growth, to have that kind of consequences in the behavior of the people having studied in that school. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwam. I just have to defend my own translation on the word appearance, because the Chinese word I show here is Tang Tang. Okay, so that's the word means the hallway. Okay, so it's about the look. So at least that's my understanding. So I also quote from Zhu Xi's interpretation talking about the look, too proud, okay, about himself. So I think that's the criticism. I'm not saying that's true, but basics, that's the word said. But anyway, okay, that's open question. So we will finish now, and for the today's session, thank you everyone for this session, and then please join us next week. And then it's important because we probably only have 3 more times to this Confucius Analect, and then it's a very dry, I have to say, okay, text, and then not many people want to read it, and really appreciate everyone attend this one, and then I do find fun with this, and thank you everyone, and we will see you next week, and then same time, and let's continue.
It does get a little spicy here in book 19. You get to watch the students, tussling amongst each other. So thank you
Yeah,
all.
just
It's
like
great to be back.
we find fun from any text. So next time we probably can
Yeah.
read. So so see you
Oh,
guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mamanzo.